Okay, good morning. For some of you that are following me, last night when I suffered from severe insomnia. So severe insomnia, I didn't go to sleep until basically dawn. Okay, and I was working on Omnivent. Whether it's my version of Omnivent or the mainline version of Omnivent, it makes no real difference because it is a open source hardware project. Okay. If one looks at I'm now going into 3D design in Fusion. 3D design in Fusion has one flaw. It has a flaw, and the flaw is the RGB LED is to the right. It's not in the right position. Okay, and what caused this? In the beginning, I thought I'd accidentally moved the LED in a way where I'd pushed it off to the right. Okay. Later on, when I looked at the 3D model, I saw that I had done what I usually do. I aligned the model with pin 1. I aligned the model with pin 1, but the model was moved off to the side because the pitch between the legs of the RGB LED was incorrect. Okay. In my hand, I have an RGB LED, the type that 5mm RGB LED. And if I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this, but you can see, I'm not sure if it's going to be focus on this. You can see that the legs are much closer together than the board I'm holding. I'm holding a board, and you can barely see. I'm going to move it until it focuses. The RGB LED, the pitch is smaller. Okay. So I'm now going to explain how to install into my PCB this RGB LED. Okay, it takes me back to the 13 years I worked at Intel. At the 13 years I worked with Intel, one of the most nightmarish part of debugging is when you pushed a board back into the backplane and you accidentally bent a pin. And we had this tool, which was a relatively expensive amp tool, for aligning the pins. It was basically a way of aligning the pins on the backplane when you'd cause damage by installing a board which was not properly aligned. I won't say it didn't happen to me. It happened to me. You find me crawling inside a cabinet with all the parts out, trying to align one particular pin. It happened. Trust me. Okay. So here we're talking about the same idea. The way to install this LED into my PCB is to take a LED like this, put it into a board which is 100 which is a 100 mm standard prototyping board, and to gently force the lead down to spread the legs, so the legs will be 100 mm spacing. That is how to install, and if you do that, 100 mm spacing, the lead will be 100% aligned in the center of the hole when you put it into the metal work. Okay. I had a discussion in the middle of the night with someone, and the discussion in the middle of the night with someone told me, just know, this is one of the feedback from a little bird that told me in the middle of the night, that the way I had the connectors on my board, I was blocking the USB cable. So what did I do? At 3 o'clock in the morning, moved the connectors. What did I move the connectors? The connectors were PWM, motor feedback, and the I2C port. The same little bird told me that there is a very, very big concern amongst the people working on the project that the cable harness will fall out in transport. Or God forbid, a cable will fall out while it's connected to a person. Okay. So at the same time of moving the headers, I took the time and I created a cable tie down point. The cable tie down point is for these 1, 2, 3, and possibly even the power can be taken through the cable tie down header, which would release all strain on the headers. Okay. The only header which is left out is the top I2C header, I2C to the piece to the I2C to display module. Okay, this header, one can fasten it down to the screw. Tie it to the screw and it's not going to go anywhere. Or glue it or fasten it to the screw. Once you've done that, there is no ways that anything is going to fall out, at least from my version of the board. Okay, at this point in time, the board, as far as I'm concerned, is complete and ready for anyone to say to me to change, what to change, why to change, how to change. Over the last few days, I've been talking about porting the project from Arduino Nano to an ESP32. go one step further and I'll say I am a hardware person that more or less believes, makes the comments like the late Bob Peace's comment, which was, what is your favorite programming language? And Bob Pease answered, solder. So I am very much along those lines. I'm not a software person. However, on the occasion, I have written software. Okay. So I began to look at, before we go that, let's go back, let's take a look at the circuit diagram. Here is on the circuit diagram how I say to secure the wiring, but do not damage the wiring. There's no point, you're not trying to tension the wiring there, you're just trying to strain and relieve the wire, which leaves only one connector, and this connector, as I said, can be tied down to the screw, to a washer on the screw. Okay, one of these posts, 4 posts can be done. Okay, finished. Moving on to software. Okay, we are now in a program which is a Microsoft program called Visual Studio Code, which is the free version of Visual Studio. And the free version of Visual Studio has an add-on called PlatfomIO. So any software developer that uses Microsoft Visual Studio can debug using the same debug tools that they would use on Visual Studio. Okay. The idea is to get the code that is roughly 1,000 lines of code, which is in ventilation machine.ino, and to get that code running on an ESP32. When I started out, it seemed to be a relatively easy task, at least at 5 in the morning. Okay. As we're talking about using the Arduino platform works on the premise that one takes libraries, known libraries, and uses them. Okay, so looking at EEPROM.h, it's an internal. I'm sure that EEPROM.h wouldn't have a problem running on ESP32. I haven't checked it, but a very, very, very major problem is server.h. Server.h only runs on Atmel boards. It doesn't run on ESP32 boards, which is sort of a problem. If you're having server.h, you can have a certain, definitely can have a certain problem. Okay, server.h okay, server.h has been rewritten to a library called ESPServer. ESPServer is a, I can see it's currently being, it's an active library because I can see that it was written in 2007, 2018 to 2020. It's a server which was being actively worked on. Okay. Actually, I think I have it open. Okay. Without going into the software, the same functions begin, attach, detach are in the server, and the same functions are in the same for ESPServer and ESP32 server. Okay. So to change this line to ESP32 server, not an issue. Wire.h is a very standard library. Okay. To move on to the pressure sensor library. The pressure sensor library was designed with a specific type of Arduino Nano in mind. It was designed in mind with an 8 megahertz Arduino 3.3 volt library. It was not designed for a 5 volt Arduino Nano, the one which is used in the project. If one goes to the website and looks and sees how have they implemented the hardware, one can see that they have pull-ups to 3.3 volts. If one looks at our version which is in the AVAVNet circuit diagram, we have pull-ups of 4.7k to 5 volts. So somewhat of a strange configuration where you've got the same SDA lines having A pull-ups to 4.7 volt to 4.7k, to 5 volts, and also pull-ups to 3.3 volts. I don't, if it works, EEPROM, be happy. But I don't trust, I don't usually trust I squared C. If it works, EEPROM. Okay, but, okay, where were we? Okay. So, SparkFun library more than likely will work on a on an ESP32. I saw once again at 5 o'clock in the morning documentation of there was some change updates done to this library last year, because the moment you'd run wire.begin, the ESP32 would hang, and there were some changes done to the library to allow it. So more than likely the SparkFun library is going to work with the ESP32. Okay, next library. Liquid crystal I2C.H. This library is ESPServer Zabenzona. Okay. If it's a son of a bitch of a library, this is the son of the bitch of a library. If one goes and looks at this library, there are a total of 8 libraries with the same name, all using different syntax. So, as I'm a good friend of Uncle Murphy, I picked the wrong one. I've got another 7 options. Okay, and if one goes to if one goes and sees, it's telling me that it's saying to me I'm at line 113. It goes to saying to me line 172. It's not prepared to accept. It's not prepared to accept begin LCD begin without parameters. And if one looks up top in the library that I've installed, it actually wants information in the function called LCD begin. So I've installed the one function, one library. They've used a different library. Hashem Yazor. Okay. Back to where we were. Arduino unique ID.h. Hallelujah. What does it say? supported on ESP32. So this is supported. To recap, this is supported. This more than likely, if I had the right library installed, wouldn't be a problem. This library, the SparkFun library, we are using outside the way it was designed. If it works, it works. It was designed around a specific 8 megahertz 3 volt nano, not a 5 volt nano. Server library, more than likely, if I replace the header file to with, instead of server.h, ESPServer.h, more than likely it's going to work. Okay. I am very, very far from a software guru, and for a large extent, my skills are creating a circuit diagram, creating a PCB. I'm not the greatest person when it comes to a keyboard. My skill set, one can see that I have skills in this level, but as I said, it's going to take me time. Okay. So that's where we're at. If somebody else would take on doing this software adaptation, I could get on with designing the ESP and getting the GPIOs working. But as at this point in time, my version of Ambivent is basically a one-man show. It's something like 18, 19 hours a day I'm working on the idea, but it is a one-man show, and from the Ambivent team, they are not overly friendly, because I picked the project apart and began fixing it. And a lot of people, especially I would say a large extent of the 40 people that started the Ambivent project, did it for personal reasons and getting good PR. And when the project appeared to be going down the lines that it actually will go out and will actually be used, a lot of these people that were on the boat for PR got cold feet and walked away. And unfortunately, the people walked away roughly around the time that I began saying, how did you do this? How did you do this? How did you do that? This isn't correct. That isn't correct. So part of the blame of people walking away falls on my head. Okay. The fact of the matter is, when lives are on the line, and when you're doing something which has the ability to save a person, you don't want to kill the person. Okay. This is the first update for the day.